It all started on a Tuesday evening, one of those unremarkable days that somehow becomes the most important day of your life. The apartment Jake and I shared was small but comfortable, a two-bedroom place we'd managed to snag near campus at a somewhat reasonable price. We'd been roommates for almost 2 years now, friends for even longer, having met during freshman orientation when we both reached for the same terrible coffee at the welcome event. I'm Alex, by the way, 23, English literature major with a minor in creative writing, and according to Jake, perpetually overthinking everything. Jake is a kinesiology major, focused on sports medicine, with the kind of easy confidence that makes everyone gravitate toward him at parties. That Tuesday had been particularly grueling. Finals week was approaching, and we'd both been pushing ourselves too hard. I'd spent 12 hours in the library working on my thesis, and Jake had been at the gym training clients back-to-back since dawn. When I finally dragged myself home around 8, I found Jake sprawled on our couch, looking as exhausted as I felt. "You look like you've been hit by a bus," he said, his voice raspy with fatigue. "Speak for yourself," I replied, dropping my backpack by the door. "You smell like you've been marinating in gym sweat all day." He laughed, running a hand through his dark curls. "Fair point. I haven't had a chance to shower yet. Been too busy trying to not fall asleep right here." There was something about the way the evening light filtered through our blinds, casting golden stripes across his face, that made me pause. I'd always known Jake was attractive, objectively speaking, of course. His broad shoulders and warm brown eyes were the subject of many appreciative glances around campus. But in that moment, with his guard down and exhaustion making him softer somehow, I felt something shift between us. "Rock, paper, scissors for first shower?" he suggested, a tradition we'd established early in our roommate relationship. I shook my head. "The hot water heater's acting up again. Landlord said they can't get someone out until tomorrow." Jake groaned, letting his head fall back against the couch cushions. "You've got to be kidding me. I can't go to bed like this, and I definitely can't face another cold shower this week." "We could," I started, then hesitated, uncertain if I should continue with the thought that had suddenly occurred to me. "We could what?" Jake prompted, eyebrow raised. "We could shower together," I said, the words tumbling out before I could overthink them. "I mean, just to conserve hot water. That way we both get at least some warm water instead of one of us getting it all and the other freezing." There was a moment of silence, during which I contemplated how quickly I could pack my belongings and move to another country to escape this awkwardness. But then Jake just shrugged. "Makes sense. Practical solution. Like those group showers after high school gym class, right?" "Right?" I agreed, though we both knew this was nothing like high school gym class. For one thing, I'd spent most of those showers staring fixedly at the tiles to avoid looking at anyone. For another, none of those boys had been Jake. We moved to the bathroom with an air of forced casualness, like two actors trying to remember their blocking in a play they'd never rehearsed. Our bathroom wasn't particularly spacious, standard apartment fare with a combination tub shower that suddenly seemed much smaller than I remembered. "I'll get the water started," Jake said, reaching past me to turn the knobs. His arm brushed against mine, and I felt a jolt of something that definitely wasn't appropriate for platonic roommates. The pipes groaned, and water began to sputter from the shower head. Steam gradually filled the small space as we both stood there, awkwardly avoiding each other's eyes. "So do we just—" I gestured vaguely at our clothes. Jake laughed, some of the tension breaking. "Unless you plan to shower fully dressed, yeah." He pulled his t-shirt over his head in one fluid motion, revealing the tanned expanse of his chest and abdomen. I'd seen Jake shirtless countless times. We lived together, after all, but something about the context made it different, more significant. I followed suit, though with considerably less grace, nearly getting tangled in my own sweater. By the time I'd managed to extricate myself, Jake had already stepped out of his sweatpants and was standing there in just his boxers. "Moment of truth," he said with a half-smile that didn't quite hide his nervousness. "Ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. We both removed our remaining clothing and stepped into the shower, careful to maintain some semblance of personal space in the confined area. The warm water was a blessing, and I couldn't help but sigh as it cascaded over my tired muscles. "Worth it," Jake murmured, eyes closed as he tilted his face toward the spray. For a few minutes, we simply stood there, taking turns under the direct flow, passing the shampoo back and forth with minimal conversation. It was almost normal, almost casual, except for the undercurrent of awareness that hummed between us like a live wire. I was reaching for the body wash when I slipped slightly on the wet surface. Jake's hands shot out immediately, steadying me by the waist. "Careful," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thanks," I replied, hyper-aware of his touch against my skin. When I looked up, I found him watching me with an intensity I'd never seen before. Water droplets clung to his eyelashes, and a rivulet traced the line of his jaw down to his neck. "Alex," he said, my name sounding different somehow in the steam-filled space. "I've been wanting to tell you something for a while now." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is it?" Instead of answering immediately, he took my wrist gently in his hands. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that I forgot to breathe. With deliberate slowness, he placed my hands on his shoulders, the warm water continuing to cascade over both of us. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of the shower. I nodded, feeling the solid muscle beneath my palms, the surprising softness of his skin. "Yes," I managed to say. "More than okay." His hands came to rest lightly on my hips, neither pulling me closer nor pushing me away, just connecting us, anchoring us in this moment that felt suspended outside of normal time. "I've been thinking about this, about us, for a long time," Jake confessed, his eyes never leaving mine. I didn't know how to bring it up without risking everything. Our friendship, our living situation, it all seemed too important to gamble with. "I know exactly what you mean," I said, relieved to finally acknowledge the feelings I'd been carefully avoiding for months. "I've been telling myself it was just roommate appreciation, or that I was confusing closeness with something else." Jake's smile was slow and genuine. "Something else, huh? And what would that something else be?" The teasing note in his voice gave me courage. "Attraction. Interest. The kind that makes you notice how someone's eyes crinkle when they laugh, or how they always leave their coffee mugs on the counter instead of putting them in the dishwasher." "Hey." I put my mugs away. "Eventually," he protested, but his thumbs were tracing small circles on my hip bones, sending shivers through me that had nothing to do with the water temperature. "The point is," I continued, "I notice everything about you, Jake. I have for a long time." The confession hung between us, transforming the steam-filled air into something charged with possibility. Jake's hands tightened slightly on my hips, drawing me a fraction closer. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, the directness of the question making me smile. "I thought you'd never ask," I replied, and then his lips were on mine, warm and certain. The kiss deepened as we stood there under the spray, my hands moving from his shoulders to the nape of his neck, fingers threading through his wet hair. His arms encircled me completely, pulling me against him until there was no space left between us. The sensation of skin against skin, slick with water, was intoxicating. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Jake rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since last summer, when you fell asleep on the couch during that documentary about deep-sea creatures." I laughed, surprised. "That's the moment that did it for you?" Me drooling over marine biology. "You were passionate about something," he said simply. "It's always attractive when you get excited about the things you love. Your whole face lights up." The water was beginning to cool, a reminder that even transformative moments are subject to practical limitations like hot water heaters. With reluctance, we finished our shower, stealing kisses between rinsing off and eventually stepping out to wrap ourselves in towels. The bathroom mirror was completely fogged over, and Jake reached out to draw a heart in the condensation, adding our initials inside with a grin that was equal parts shy and pleased with himself. It was such a teenage gesture, so sweetly earnest, that I couldn't help but lean in and kiss him again. "So what happens now?" I asked as we dried off, the question encompassing far more than just our immediate plans for the evening. Jake considered this, running his towel through his damp hair. "Now we go on a proper date. Dinner, maybe a movie. The whole traditional experience. We've had dinner together hundreds of times," I pointed out. "True, but now I get to hold your hand across the table and not pretend I'm reaching for the salt," he countered, wrapping his towel around his waist. "And I get to call you my boyfriend, if that's something you want." The word boyfriend sent a pleasant warmth through me that had nothing to do with the lingering steam in the bathroom. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that a lot." Later that night, as we lay in Jake's bed, which was slightly larger than mine. Talking until the early hours of the morning, I marveled at how a simple necessity, like conserving hot water, had catalyzed something that had been building between us for months, maybe even years. Jake's arm was draped over my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. "Do you think we would have figured this out eventually?" he asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "Or would we have just gone on pretending there was nothing there?" I considered the question, thinking about all the near misses and almost moments that had punctuated our friendship. The time he'd fallen asleep on my shoulder during a long bus ride home for the holidays. The night we'd stayed up until dawn talking about our hopes for the future. The countless small touches and lingering glances that we'd both dismissed or rationalized away. "I think we would have gotten there eventually," I said. "But I'm glad it happened now. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel for you." He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "Me too. Although I have to say, as far as romantic settings go, a shower with questionable water pressure isn't exactly what I had imagined for our big moment." I laughed, turning in his arms to face him. "What had you imagined?" "I don't know. Something cinematic. Sunset on the beach. Rain-soaked declarations in the middle of the street. The classic rom-com scenarios. I think our way was perfect," I told him. "It was real. It was us." The weeks that followed were a delightful exploration of our relationship's new dimension. We went on those proper dates Jake had mentioned, dinner at the little Italian place near campus where the owner knew us by name, a revival screening of an old film noir at the independent theater downtown, a hike to the waterfall that had been on our local bucket list for ages. But the most meaningful moments were still the quiet ones in our apartment. Cooking dinner together, Jake's hand resting on the small of my back as he reached past me for the salt. Studying side by side on the couch, our legs tangled together under a shared blanket. Morning coffee in comfortable silence, exchanging sleepy smiles over steaming mugs. Our friends were unsurprised by the development. "Finally," said Emma, my study partner from comparative literature, when we told her. "The tension between you two was getting unbearable to witness." Jake's teammate from his recreational basketball league just clapped him on the back and said, "About time you made a move. You've been talking about Alex nonstop for at least a year." This was news to me, and I raised an eyebrow at Jake, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "What can I say? You're very talk-about-able." There were adjustments, of course. Learning how to navigate the transition from friendship to relationship, figuring out how to disagree as partners rather than roommates, balancing our individual lives with our shared one. But even the challenges felt worthwhile. Each small hurdle overcome, bringing us closer together. 1 month after our shower revelation, we were getting ready for bed when Jake wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as we both looked at our reflection in the bathroom mirror. "You know what I was thinking about today?" he asked. "How much you adore me and can't believe your luck," I suggested, leaning back against his chest. He laughed, the sound vibrating through both our bodies. "Well, yes, always that. But specifically, I was thinking about how grateful I am for our building's terrible hot water heater." I turned in his arms, looping my hands behind his neck in what had become a familiar gesture. "Should we send the landlord a thank you note? Dear sir, your negligent maintenance of essential utilities directly resulted in our current happiness." "Maybe a fruit basket," Jake suggested, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Or we could just pay our rent on time and not complain about the drafty windows for a month." "Let's not get carried away," I said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Later, as we lay in what was now unquestionably our bed rather than just his, I thought about the strange, winding paths that lead people to each other. How many small decisions, minor inconveniences, and random chances align to create the most significant connections in our lives. "What are you thinking about?" Jake murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "You've got that contemplative writer look." "Just about coincidences," I said. "If the water heater hadn't broken, if we hadn't both been so tired that day, if either of us had been a little less brave." "I don't think it was coincidence," Jake said thoughtfully. "I think we were always heading here, from the first day we met. Some connections are just inevitable." I smiled in the darkness, warmed by his certainty. That's surprisingly romantic coming from a guy who analyzes biomechanics for fun. "What can I say? You're bringing out my hidden depths," he replied, pulling me closer. Besides, there's plenty of science behind attraction and compatibility. Pheromones, neurochemical responses, psychological pattern recognition. Now there's the Jake I know and love, I said, the word love slipping out naturally, without premeditation. There was a moment of stillness, and then Jake propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read in the dim light. "You love me?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I could have backtracked, could have claimed it was just a figure of speech. But the truth was simple and undeniable. "Yes," I said. "I love you. Is that okay?" His smile was answer enough, but he said the words anyway. "It's more than okay. I love you too, Alex. Have for a while now." And as he leaned down to kiss me, I thought about that moment in the shower, when he took my wrists and placed them on his shoulders, a gesture that was both a question and an invitation, an offering of vulnerability and a request for connection. It seemed fitting that our relationship had begun with such a simple, honest action. No grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just two people choosing to be brave enough to acknowledge what was already there between them. Sometimes the most meaningful moments in life aren't the ones that look significant from the outside. They're the quiet decisions, the small acts of courage, the gentle revelations that occur in ordinary places like a steamy bathroom on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. And sometimes, the most important journeys we take are the ones that lead us not to new destinations, but to people who have been beside us all along, waiting for us to finally see them clearly. As I drifted toward sleep in Jake's arms, I made a mental note to include a line about the temperamental hot water heater in our next lease renewal. Some inconveniences, it turns out, are actually blessings in disguise. Total _char_count, 17,945.